Hello everyone, and welcome to this class on how to renew yourself. My name is Edelstein, and I'm going to talk to you today about something that is increasingly important. It's important for our own well-being, it's important to change culture, it's important for spiritual illumination, and it's important to bring about a depth of meaning and purpose and confidence and relaxation and generosity in our lives. Renewal is not a very hot topic, but as the new buzzword as posted by Arianna Huffington and released in her new book is thrive. So we all want to thrive now. We don't just want to get somewhere, we want to get somewhere with our full potential, with all circuits firing, and our ideas about what thriving means need to change. As we've seen, the way we live is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for our planet, it's not sustainable for our emotional system, it's not sustainable for our relationships. We're stressed, we're addicted to our cell phones. More and more adults are turning to pharmaceuticals to focus, not because of any specific problem, but because of attention deficit disorder, which is a real disease in many cases. In many cases it's not. It's a result of a lack of renewal. We become brittle at the core of our being. We become unpliable. Now, the opposite of that kind of stress is certainly a certain type of relaxation. Now, if you're too relaxed, nothing's going to happen. Things are going to stay the same. We wouldn't have discovered fire. We wouldn't have built the steam engine, and we wouldn't be where we are now. So I am not advocating to going to either Jamaica or South India and just opting it for a life of relaxation and vacation. I don't think that our world needs that right now, and I don't think we need that as human beings. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what it means to renew and rejuvenate. I want to talk about it in the spiritual sense, and I also want to talk about it in a practical sense. I had the opportunity in this past week to be in New York at a large event with a lot of very high-powered media personalities and CEOs of multinational corporations, and they were speaking about the importance of meditation. What was awesome about it was they were all using their own lives and the fact that as accomplished as they all were, they were suffering at a level of self from this lack of renewal and this inability to renew. And so they were using their own lives to push that out into culture and then to inspire regular people like you and I to take that to heart, and to inspire employers to take that to heart and create the space for a type of renewal that is just essential for human thriving. So how do we do that? The first step is we do want to learn to drop inwards. We want to go in. This takes something because there's so much information. There's that stack of magazines that we have to read. There's that inbox that still isn't down to zero. There's that list that needs to be made. There are the bills that need to get paid. There's the program and the PowerPoint that need to get designed. There's the next project. There are people waiting. There are demands. We're plugged in and people need us and we need to respond. So the idea of letting go and going inward, it feels almost like you have to pull away from yourself. Like you have to literally kind of stretch yourself back into yourself. So you imagine that the surface is there and you're sort of peeling yourself away. It's a little bit like Velcro. You can almost hear it go, and you're dropping back into yourself. It's something we want to cultivate the habit to, because we don't need to take 2 hours every morning to meditate. We can do that with a shift of posture and a shift of attention where we unplug ourselves from the exterior. And it's one of my all-time favorite philosophers, Ralph Waldo Emerson, said, "The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions." That's pretty cool. So you think about it, as we're moving inward, we're stretching ourselves back away from the known. And as we stretch ourselves away from the unknown, however we return to the surface of things is going to be different. Our mind is going to be expanded by that experience, so long as we pay attention to it and start looking at what happens. Now, the second aspect of this is that we actually don't just move back, we have to let go. Letting go is a hard thing. Moving back, disengaging, disentangling, that's a hard thing. But letting go of the surface of things and really letting go is a really hard thing. We have to allow ourselves to fall back blind. So I'm sure you've probably played those trust games where everyone's standing in a circle and you're in the center and you just fall backwards and you have your eyes closed and they just keep moving you from side to side. You fall forward and you fall back and you have to trust. That's what it's like letting go of the surface. You have to let go so that you experience that state of being suspended, not knowing if anything's going to catch you. Because if you knew what was going to catch you, you'd still be holding on in some way to the surface of things as you know it. So part of renewal is allowing ourselves to disengage from what we already know, because that keeps us bound. That we can only move so far in what we already know. And maybe it's pretty far. Maybe it's the size of the state of California. Maybe it's as big as the continent of Asia. But we can't really renew ourselves in a fundamental way if we're still within even very large parameters of what we know. So we've got to let go. We've got to let go of the surface of things. We have to dare to allow ourselves to move backwards in life. Now, for those of us who have an evolutionary bent and we're consumed by this sense of development and forward movement, this integration of letting go and falling back is part and parcel of the whole process of development. The process of development is about constant renewal, constant growth and movement. But constant growth doesn't mean only pushing always in one direction. And the sense of letting go of the surface of things, a sense of falling back inwards, a sense of returning to source is a key part of the spiritual journey. They've often been separated in contemporary thinking. So the mystics' journey to the source, the evolutionists and the technology innovators move forward, and they're two different camps of human development. If you look at our own experience, living in the culture that we live in, we're part of both. We have that innate human longing for depth and mystery and spirit and consciousness, and we have that call to both relate as an individual in an I-thou relationship with that which is always a mystery. That second face of God, that learning to be in relationship with the unknown. And we also have that longing to merge so that we're no longer separate from that which is source. So there really is only one. And whether we approach that from the sense of being one with process and as process itself, or we approach it as letting go into emptiness in meditation without seed, or if we approach that from a Buddhist angle of looking at dependent origination, where all things are so intertwined, so dependently arising, that there's no thing that holds itself as separate from anything else. However we approach that, this idea of returning to source, and of that being part of the unfolding of our understanding of our interiors, the unfolding of innovation, the unfolding of greater capacities of empathy and compassion and creativity, which are all one and the same. This aspect of journeying to the source is critical. In that part of journeying to the source, one of the things that we're doing is we're paying homage to the self, and that's the self, capital S. And it's also our experience of self, capital S. So in some way, we want to find that non-narcissistic relationship to supporting ourselves. We want to find something that's not hyper-indulgent and that makes us relate to ourselves as somehow the wounded victim of the chaos of life, that we're downtrodden, we need help and we need support, and we're so tired and we're so stressed and we're so hurt. A lot of those things may be true. We may be having an objectively very hard time. There are a lot of challenges in life. There's serious illness, there's death, there's loss of loved ones. There are really a lot of serious issues. But the way we are going to renew ourselves at the core of our being, no matter how objectively challenging our lives are, or how objectively easy our lives are and how sorry we feel for ourselves, the only way to do that is to learn how to support ourselves in a way that does away with the sense of being a victim and hard done by. And the way we do that is we fall in love with Source. We honor Source. We give homage to Source. We express our gratitude for Source. We develop a relationship with that. And in that, we also develop a sense of compassion and love and respect for ourselves who can actually appreciate that. So if you don't allow yourself to experience that sense of wonder at your own ability to contemplate these things, your own ability to be in relationship with Source, then you won't be able to extend that kind of outpouring of wonder and love and appreciation and enthusiasm for that which is such a beautiful mystery. So respecting this capital S self and this self-love, self-care that everyone talks about now really can be seen together. And when you see them as working together, you really shortcut that part of ourselves that wants to act like we're 3 and in the supermarket and not getting what we want. That's not a very pretty attitude, as I noticed with the 3-year-old that I was with just 2 days ago. It's a stage we all go through, but we don't want to relate to ourselves as the beautiful adults with the capacities that we have in that way. So this is an interesting way to think about it, to think about the co-dependent relationship between our ability to love God, our ability to love consciousness, and our respect and care and self-love. This is how we renew ourselves. It's really something worth thinking about, and it's really worth thinking about in this way and approaching it freshly. It's something that it's renewing ourselves. It's not a list that we want to, like, now I'm going to fit in my 10 minutes of meditation, I'm going to fit in my 10 minutes of breathing exercises, I'm going to fit in my 5 minutes of stretching, and I'm going to practice getting my email box down to 0 so I'm not stressed about it, and I'm going to take my Facebook app off of my phone. Those will help us. They're great tools. But what's really going to renew us is learning how to stretch our minds in the way that Emerson did, so we start relating to the whole process of renewal, enlightening discovery, enlightening inquiry, and creativity and innovation and participation in the world in a fresh way. And one of those ways is to see how they work together and to work on eliminating these dichotomies so that it's not us against the world. It's not my self-care against my contribution to humanity. So these are they're big questions. They're big questions, and they're very relevant questions right now. In order to listen and inquire in this way, we want to start opening up what I call an inner ear. Ken Wilber talks a lot about the interior of ourselves being the same as the interior of the cosmos. That as we go inward and we discover that interior self, we are also, because there is one consciousness, going into the interior of the cosmos, of the universe itself. It takes a little to wrap your mind around it. It's kind of a little bit far out. But the way we do that is not by trying to break our brains on this conceptually, but to listen and find this inner ear that has a certain sensitivity to spiritual inquiry. And we find that as we start listening in that way, we're creating a kind of sponginess in our interior. When we create the sense of porousness or sponginess, we can absorb. And we can absorb that nectar of the self. We can absorb that ever-renewing quality of consciousness. We can really start to internalize the idea that there is some type of, it's not really a fountain of youth, it's a fountain of ever-renewing, non-depleting energy and intelligence that lies at the heart of life. So as we listen for it, the act of listening itself is renewing. Because we're not listening to get something. We're not listening for a particular sound. I remember when I was a kid, my parents used to take me to the symphony. We used to go and hear Peter and the Wolf. And there's a certain part where one of the instruments, it's very frenetic, and one of the instruments is the wolf. And so the conductor, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Andre Previn was the conductor, and Andre Previn would come out and he'd say, "Now kids, listen for the wolf." And then he would ask everyone at the end of the symphony, "Did you hear the wolf?" And I was, about 5, and I was listening so hard to hear the wolf that I didn't hear anything that was happening. And I never knew if I heard the wolf or not, because I was listening for something particular. And as I grew older, I became able to just listen for the sake of listening. And listening to complex and beautiful music for the sake of listening, you start to just experience the beauty and the opening, and the music feels exterior and it feels interior, and you can't really tell where the sound and the experience of the sound and the joy of the sound is coming from. Beautiful, catchy music has that. The happy song has that. Once you hear that, you feel the happiness inside. And you go, how do I feel that inside? But you do, and it has that kind of quality of opening up at the interiors of ourselves. And so it works on a very simple level, on a level we can grasp with music or with beauty. It's a listening that is also a listening for the deeper intimations of how life makes sense. What really are the values? What are the relationships between the one and the many? What's the role of individuality in relationship to the collective? Is consciousness just one that we exist within? Is it something that we have a relationship with, or it has a relationship with us, or there's no relationship because there's only one? This type of listening and just sitting with these questions creates this sponginess in ourselves. And when we're spongy, we can absorb that kind of nutrient-rich sense of the self-absolute. And that's really how we can show up in today's world where there's so many demands on us. There's so much that's asked of us. There really is so much to know and to be part of. How do we stay in balance? How do we stay attuned to ourselves when we meet people who seem larger than life? How do we connect with people who we feel are so much bigger? And how do we relate to them on a human level? Because ultimately, our ability to change the world is going to come from our human ability to have a very deep and rich and multifaceted relationship with each other. So that's why renewal it's not just, I'm going to go to Jamaica and I'm going to hang out on the beach and I'm going to come back refreshed. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing that right now. But this is something where we really do want to cultivate this. It's going to take courage. It's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take courage for any of us to dare to take ourselves so seriously that we take this need for renewal seriously, that we respect our own contribution to life, that we're aware that we have, just by who we are, something that's important to cherish and to be present with in life and in the world. It's not what we have yet to accomplish. It's not what we have yet to develop. It's not what we have yet to learn. It's not when we get that next position or promotion, or when we define ourselves, or when we know what we want to be when we grow up. It has to do with this kind of courage to take the risk, to experience the immediacy of a relationship to life that's deeply purposeful. And that takes guts, because there's a lot we have to let go of our own ideas, of other people's ideas, and mainly, as we talked about earlier, of the surface of things. Because as we risk and let go of the surface of things and dare to fall backwards, not knowing what's going to happen, through that act of courage, we will start to take risks in our own understanding and find out that even if we never took philosophy in college, or never went to college, or cracked open Emerson and just like kind of threw him out the window because he seemed too far away from us, that philosophical and spiritual heart is part of the human gifts that we've developed into. And as we have the courage to let go of our limiting ideas about what we can and can't do, we will start to listen and discover a certain type of intuitive curiosity. Because it's not inherently wisdom, I don't think. We cultivate wisdom by integrating our experience and our understanding and our intimations together, and that's really, I think, where full-bodied wisdom comes from. But there's an intuitive, innate curiosity in human beings, and that's part of renewal. It's part of development. It's part of refreshing ourselves, because the more curious we are, like children, they're curious and they're refreshed. They're like full of beans. They're ready to go, and that kind of curiosity is what lifts our hearts and gives us the energy to approach aspects of life that have been pressured for us and that have seemed too limiting. So with that, once we discover that kind of courage, we also want to expand into that space. We want to allow ourselves to be in that space without agenda, without need to perform, without need to come up with a product out of that. And just let ourselves expand and become more fully human and fill that new space and see where we get to. What that's going to bring up in us is joy and happiness. It really is going to allow us a kind of just joy at life. And it's fascinating because we always think that joy is farther away from us. I was teaching a retreat this past weekend, and everyone who came had some major life transition. Some people had good transitions, some people had bad transitions. You know, new family, new arrival on its way, to major job transition, to separation and bereavement. They were big, big issues. And everyone was concerned about what was going to happen and how they were going to get to some resolution with whatever issue they wanted to work on over the weekend. And as we explored this process of renewal, after it really started the first night, so after about 2 hours, there was this quality of lightness of being and joy and happiness and beauty and fun and a sense of intimacy with people who'd never met each other before, and just love that came not from resolution of these issues or progress on these issues, but from allowing for the process of renewal to occur. Just making space for it created this uprising of happiness. So I really encourage you to practice, to create space, to give it a little bit of time, and to then respect the kind of miracles that will occur. Because it really is a miracle when we go from being super stressed and upset and having already talked over some issue that's bothered us for like 80 hours in the last 2 weeks and still gotten no closer. It's a miracle that after 2 hours you can experience this type of sense of possibility and joy and love and intimacy and comfort in oneself, presence in oneself. So take the time to respect that. Give it its due. Give it its space. The more we cultivate a relationship with those types of miracles, then the more real they'll become in our lives, the more we'll acknowledge their reality as much as we acknowledge the stress and tension and lack that is a part of our experience. And that will rejuvenate us. It really will nourish us at the depths of our being, and it will enable us to do things that we never expected, go places we never expected, and experience a type of connectedness and being in our own lives. Not being walk-ins in our lives, but being in our own lives in a way that we all crave and that the world certainly needs. Because it needs us to be present. We need each other to be present. We need to be present for each other. So I hope that has given you some sense of how to begin. And I really do encourage you to experiment and practice and take the time to see where you get to. Give it a little space. Thank you.